Hello everyone, my name is Carlos Contreras Vergara. This is my video presentation about my professional practicum experience, where I will dissect the needs analysis and unit plan design I used in this semester. This was carried out in the Liceo Bolívar de las Salinas del Caguano, specifically on a course of Segundo Medio C composed by 22 students, and the establishment had around 1,500 students. So now moving forward, the objectives of the presentation was to describe the social, educational, linguistic, and professional context of the Liceo Bolívar de las Salinas and the Segundo Medio C. The second objective is to present the needs analysis instrument, methodology, and key findings from the 22 students. Objective number 3 is to explain how findings directly inform the unit plan design with an integrated language teaching approach. And finally, to reflect critically on my professional growth and their development throughout the practicum. The educational context, as I said, is from around 1,500 students. It is from Talcahuano, Biobío region from Chile. And they had two different paths. They had port operator and logistic operator. They had a strong maritime identity. It is socially diverse. Many of the students were from working class families or poor worker families. The collaboration in this practicum was very good with my colleague Priscila Mercado Cruz, specifically about the second graders, the Segundo Medio C. The students were from 14 to 16 years old. They had a mixed ability group. It was predominantly A2 level. They had high energy and attention management was key during the semester. We had a morning class, so some of students came to class exhausted or sleepy. They had strong preferences for music, podcasts, and kinesthetic activities, and the majority enjoyed from working in groups or pairs. So the student instrument, it was separated in four clusters. The first cluster was emotional and affective. We questioned number 1 and 2, and it was related to how the student felt that day and how the relation with English was. Second cluster was learning preferences. Question number 3, question 4, 5, and 8. The favorite preferences to learn English were music and podcasts, kinesthetic activities, videos, and games, and this directly shaped the activities in my unit plan. Um, Cluster number 3 was about self-assessment of their skills, about listening, speaking, writing, reading, and comprehension. They rated from 1 to 4, 1 meaning not very hard, and 4 being very hard. And the last cluster was about motivation and English exposure. Question number 6, 10, and 12. The awareness of English in the future class or adulthood, out of the school exposure, the grammar knowledge, which helped me to develop my unit plan design. So in the data that is more relevant from the student needs analysis were that the 75% of students find the writing was very hard for them. The 70% of students find that speaking was very hard or hard. 80% of them preferred to group work, and 75% acknowledge that English is key for their future careers. So reflecting on the context, first the social context, as I said, they came from poor industry families or working class families. They had limited English exposure outside the school, mostly interacting with exams or during the school class. The socioeconomic conditions influenced that the homework competition was mainly in during the class, and they had, as I mentioned before, fatigue and morning class prior exams was related to that, and which shaped the readiness of the students for the class. The professional context, as I said before, they were all related to maritime career pathways. Um, they needed a real world experience or a real world based task that they could face in a common day in the port. And this was all supported by the feedback of my guide teacher in the school. The scholastic context for the students were that they had mixed ability, mostly A2. Prior to the classroom managements were challenges were that they were energetic and high movement class. They were anxious all the time and they carried a lot of burden for the outside of the class problems. They had a neutral rather than a negative attitude towards the English. Mostly because of the way the content was presented for them previously. They had a strong preference for music, movement, and games as learning tools. And the linguistic context for speaking, they had a lot of anxiety, and their reluctance was observed during the classroom, um, mostly because some of the classmates mocked them when they were um, pronunciating the words or speaking out loud. The writing was the biggest productive skill gap because they didn't remember all the vocabulary that was being addressed during the prior years. I addressed it in just modeling the activities as much as I could. The listening, they were rather confident because they often listen to music or podcasts, but they did not have extensive listening skills very developed. And of course, the accent was a key here because they were good at American English accent, but not a British accent. And the knowledge of modal verbs and conditionals was very limited, which I identified in question number 11. So the approach that I took for the unit plan and the integrated language teaching approach. Lesson number 1 was about daily habits and routines. The skills involved were listening and speaking. The approach was PPP plus music input. And as you can see, the needs analysis was based on the music podcast preference and the speaking anxiety. Lesson number 2, it was technology and social media. The skills involved were reading and writing. The approach was task-based scaffolding, and it was related to the writing weaknesses and the app/tech preferences in question number 8. Lesson number 3 was about modal verbs for advice. The skills involved were speaking and writing. The approach was role playing plus peer work. As I observed in question number 11, that they had difficulties identifying modal verbs and the usage of them, and the group preferences with question number 5. Lesson number 4 was digital safety, and all the 4 skills were integrated. The approach was TDL plus TIC tools, and the needs analysis relation was to lower of the school exposure and future career relevance. Now, moving forward for my professional growth and development, a critical reflection. First, before the needs analysis, I relied entirely on intuition and observation. I had some knowledge of the class, but it lacked systematic data to back up the pedagogical decisions. During the implementation, I learned that really reading the survey data critically helps me to discover the gap between what I assumed and what in real time the data confirmed or complicated on what I expected from my students. Moving forward to the unit design phase, this grew my ability to translate the findings into concrete lesson decisions. Also, of course, the constant improvement and the advices that my head teacher in the university and in the school gave me helped me to shape my unit. The activity types, scaffolding levels, grouping strategies, and inclusion accommodations were all entirely based on my student needs analysis and also the context I gathered during the exercise of teaching. Finally, the post-teaching reflection, I think that I developed a lot my awareness of how affective and socioeconomic factors shape learning. I learned to integrate classroom management as a social justice consideration. Now, moving forward, my conclusions. I think that the needs analysis was the pedagogical compass that guided me every instructional decision in this unit. It transformed intuition into evidence-based teaching. Um, Integrating social, scholastic, professional, and linguistic dimensions reveals that language learning is never context-free. It has always been shaped by who the learners are and where they are going. This practicum has deepened my commitment to be more inclusive, reflective, and humanizing English language teaching in public secondary schools. I think that as a teacher, as a future teacher, we always have to aim for a more meaningful teaching ways. How to connect with our students is critically fundamental to at the end of the product be more completed. It has to be all related. The context, the emotions of the students, the content, the context of where we are situated as we are EFL learners. Everything has to be taken into account so we can have a more integrated education. Thank you for listening. and see you next time.